Ever get that feeling when you start a new Unity project and it's like staring at a blank canvas? A little daunting, right?
It is. It's that classic blank page syndrome, but for game development.
Exactly. Fear not, my friend, because today we're diving into two Unity heroes that'll change your game, and that is scenes and prefabs.
Yeah, they're the unsung heroes that make everything tick.
Okay, so let's start with scenes. I've always loved that analogy of a scene in a play. Like it's a snapshot in time of everything happening on stage.
Yeah,
Right.
spot on. Imagine a scene file in Unity as that stage. It holds everything. Your characters strutting their stuff, the environment setting the mood. Basically, all those Lego bricks or game objects that make up your game world. And just like a stage has a curtain call, this snapshot is saved with that handy tin Unity at the end of its name.
So it's not just about the levels themselves. The source material mentions something about menus being scenes, too.
Absolutely. Don't limit yourself to just levels. Think title screens, those pause menus where you catch your breath, even those game over screens that make you want to try again, hopefully. They're all individual scenes in their own right.
Huh.
Yeah.
So it's like breaking down the game into these digestible chunks, kind of like chapters in a book almost.
Yeah.
But how do we actually wrangle all those game objects within a scene? I mean, it could get pretty chaotic in there, right?
That's where Unity's organizational skills come in handy. Think of it like this. You've got your stage set for your scene, but you need a way to keep track of all the props and actors.
Okay.
Enter the hierarchy. Inspector and scene tabs. They're like your trusty stage manager, choreographer, and set designer all rolled into one.
Okay, love the analogy, but let's break it down even further. What does each one actually do?
Okay, so imagine you're building that virtual dollhouse we talked about earlier. The hierarchy is like your inventory list. Every piece of furniture, every little decoration, lifted out neatly. That's all your game objects.
So if I want to move that creepy Victorian doll to a different room, I'd do it from the hierarchy.
You got it. But what if you wanted to repaint that creepy doll or, change its expression to something less unsettling? That's where the inspector comes in. It lets you tweak the individual properties of each game object. Color, position, even those little scripts that give your game that special sauce.
So the hierarchy's the what, and the inspector is the how. I'm starting to get the hang of this.
Exactly. And think of the Scene tab as that top-down view of your dollhouse. You can rearrange furniture, zoom in and out to get a better look. It's your visual playground for designing the look and feel of your game.
It's amazing how these tools all work together to create something so complex. You've got your overview, your detail-oriented editor, and the visual representation all in one place.
That's the beauty of Unity, really. It gives you all these powerful tools, and once you understand how they work together, the possibilities are endless.
So we've got these awesome scenes all set up, like different rooms in our game's mansion, right? But how do we actually get our players moving between them, without those loading screens that feel longer than a coffee break?
Ah, yes, the dreaded loading screen. Nobody wants to stare at a progress bar when they're itching to explore a game world. Thankfully, Unity gives us a tool for that, and it's called the Scene Manager.
Scene manager. Sounds important. Is that like the grand staircase connecting all the rooms in our mansion?
That's a great way to put it. Think of the Scene Manager as the director, orchestrating those seamless transitions between your scenes. It's the reason you go from battling a dragon in a fiery volcano to chilling in a peaceful forest glade without your game skipping a beat.
Okay, I'm liking the sound of this already. So how do we actually tell the scene manager what to do? Is it like whispering stage directions?
Well, you could whisper. But typing it out is generally more effective. The simplest way is using scenemanager.loadScene. You give it the name of the scene you want to go to. Think of it like telling your director, next up, the spooky graveyard scene.
Straightforward enough. But the source material mentions something about this method being, I don't know, a bit jarring. Like a sudden jump cut in a movie?
You're picking up on the nuances already. You're right. Scene manager. Load scene is like a hard cut. It gets the job done, but it can be a bit abrupt for the player. Imagine like walking through a door and suddenly, bam, you're in a completely different place. A little disorienting, right?
Yeah. I can see how that would take you out of the moment. So how do we achieve that smooth transition, that feeling of naturally moving from one scene to the next?
That's where our friend Scene Manager, Load Scene Async, comes in. Instead of that jarring cut, it's like a slow fade, a gentle transition that keeps the player immersed. Imagine those sliding doors in sci-fi movies. That's the vibe we're going for.
Okay, I'm all about those smooth transitions, but how does Load Scene Async actually work its magic?
It's all about loading things in the background. Imagine streaming a movie. You don't have to download the whole thing before you start watching, right? Load scene async is similar. It lets your game start loading that spooky graveyard in the background while the player is still wrapping things up in the volcano lair.
So while our hero is giving that dragon a final farewell, the game is already prepping the next scene. Sneaky and efficient. I love it. The source material also mentions something about progress bars and this whole async thing. What's the connection there?
Ah, good eye. Since Scene Manager.load scene async works behind the scenes, it allows you to display those handy progress bars. It's like giving your players a heads up. Just a few more seconds, that graveyard is almost ready for you.
It's all about managing those player expectations and keeping things running smoothly. I get it. This is making me think about those massive open world games I love. Are they really just one giant scene?
That's a common misconception. Imagine trying to stuff an entire continent's worth of environments and characters into one scene. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Right.
And a loading screen that would make you question your life choices.
Yeah, I'd probably just give up and order a pizza at that point.
Yeah.
So what's the secret sauce behind those sprawling game worlds?
It's all about breaking things down into smaller, more manageable chunks and using a technique called scene merging or additive loading.
Okay, so instead of one massive scene, we're talking about a bunch of smaller scenes that fit together like a jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. Think of it like exploring a vast forest. As you walk deeper, new areas load seamlessly around you, while areas you've left behind get unloaded to free up memory. It's like magic, but it's really just clever scene management.
So how does this scene merging work in Unity? Is it a whole other beast?
It's surprisingly straightforward. You
Mhm.
still use those trusty scene manager commands, either load scene or load scene async, but with a little twist. You add load scene mode.additive to let Unity know, hey, don't just switch scenes on me, add this new one to what's already loaded.
So you're basically telling Unity to keep building upon the world that's already there, like adding more Lego bricks to an ever-growing creation.
Precisely. And just like with those Lego creations, it's important to be mindful of how many pieces you're adding.
What do you mean by that? Too many Legos can't be a bad thing, right?
Well, in the context of game dev, each loaded scene takes up precious memory. And while merging scenes is amazing for those massive open worlds, you need to use it strategically. It's all about finding that sweet spot between creating a seamless player experience and keeping those loading times in check.
So it's like walking a tightrope between ambition and optimization. One wrong step, and.
Let's just say you don't want to be responsible for players rage quitting because their game keeps crashing. That's why it's crucial to regularly test your game's performance, especially when you're dealing with multiple loaded scenes.
Solid advice. So to sum it all up, scenes are like the building blocks of our game, and the scene manager is the maestro, making sure those transitions are smooth and seamless. And when we're feeling extra ambitious and want to create those massive game worlds, scene merging is our secret weapon. But like any good superhero, we've got to use our powers responsibly, right?
Exactly. Think of scenes like chapters in a book, each one contributing to the larger narrative of your game. By mastering the art of scene management, you're not just creating a game, you're crafting an experience.
We've talked about scenes, the stages of our game, and the scene manager, our trusty stage director. But what about those recurring elements, those props and characters that appear throughout our game's story? Surely we don't have to create them from scratch every single time, right?
Right. That's where the magic of prefabs comes in. Imagine being able to create a blueprint for that perfect treasure chest, complete with its intricate carvings and gleaming gold trim. With prefabs, you build it once, and then poof, you can sprinkle copies throughout your game world without breaking a sweat.
Okay, that's the kind of efficiency I can get behind. But it's more than just copy pasting, right? I mean, what if I want some variations in my treasure chests? Some wooden ones for those beginner's dungeons, maybe a few encrusted with jewels for a royal treasury.
You're thinking like a seasoned game developer. You're right, prefabs aren't just about cloning identical objects. They're about creating a base template that you can then customize and tweak to fit your needs.
Okay.
Think of it like baking cookies. You start with a basic dough recipe, but then you can add different flavors, sprinkles, or even turn them into sandwiches if you're feeling adventurous.
Okay. I'm following this delicious analogy. So how do we whip up these prefabs in Unity? Do we need a special oven?
No need for baking sheets here.
Yeah.
Creating a prefab is as simple as dragging and dropping. You take any game object in your scene, that meticulously crafted treasure chest, for instance, and drag it into your project window. Boom, you've just created a prefab.
And you can tell.
And you can tell it's special. because it gets that cool blue cube icon.
Ah, so it's like marking our masterpiece with a blue ribbon.
Yeah.
I noticed the source material also mentioned something about blue highlighting in the hierarchy. What's that all about?
That's Unity's way of saying, hey, this game object is linked to a prefab. It's a handy visual cue that lets you see, at a glance, which objects in your scene are instances of a prefab and which ones are one-offs.
So I can instantly see if that treasure chest is part of my master blueprint or if it's a unique snowflake.
Yeah.
Very cool. But let's talk about making changes. What if I want to tweak something about my prefab? Do I have to go back to the original blueprint every time?
That's the beauty of it. You have options. You can update the master prefab directly, which will then cascade those changes to all the instances in your scenes. Very powerful, but use it with caution.
Okay.
Imagine changing the size of your cookie cutter after you've already made a dozen cookies. Might have some unintended consequences there.
Yeah, I'm picturing tiny, shrunken treasure chests, and it's not a good look. So what's the alternative when we want to tweak just one instance of a prefab?
That's where the power of overrides comes in. You can modify a prefab instance directly within a scene, and those changes will only affect that specific object. Think of it like adding sprinkles to just one cookie. It doesn't change the recipe, but it makes that particular cookie extra special.
Okay, I'm starting to get the hang of this. Tweaking the blueprint updates everything, but making changes in the scene only affects that one instance. But what about those modified fields mentioned in the source material? They sound a bit intimidating.
Not at all. Modified fields are just Unity's way of highlighting the differences between a prefab instance and its source. Let's say you have a prefab for a simple wooden door. You decide one of your doors needs to be locked for a dramatic plot twist. You add a locking mechanism to that specific door instance, and bam! The locked field becomes bold in the inspector, indicating it's different from the master prefab.
So it's like leaving a little sticky note on our blueprint saying, hey, I made a change here. That's actually quite helpful.
Exactly. It's all about keeping track of those variations and making sure you're aware of any differences between your prefabs and their instances. And here's a pro tip. Just like with scenes, smaller, more focused prefabs are generally the way to go. Imagine trying to manage a single prefab for an entire castle. Talk about a recipe for headaches.
Okay, that's terrifying. I'm getting the sense that organization and thinking in smaller, more manageable chunks is key when it comes to both scenes and prefabs.
You're hitting the nail on the head. It's all about working smarter, not harder. By breaking down your game world into these modular components, scenes for the stages, prefabs for the recurring elements, you're setting yourself up for a much smoother development process.
This has been eye-opening. Scenes and prefabs might seem like basic concepts, but wow, they're the backbone of game development and Unity. And for our listeners out there, remember, the real magic happens when you start experimenting. Open up Unity, create some scenes, play around with prefabs, and see what amazing things you can build. You might be surprised at what you can achieve with these powerful tools.
And remember, every game dev journey, no matter how epic, starts with a single step, a single scene, a single prefab. So go forth, create, and most importantly, have fun.